Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show. Well, as we are slowly coming out of this pandemic and opening the world again for travel, a lot of people are starting to think about countries they need to check off their bucket list. To talk about that today, Gina Morello, she is just, she goes by Adventurous Gina. And thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well,
I appreciate it.
I've got to brag on you. You've been to almost every country on the planet.
Yes, almost every UN country on the planet. I'm currently at 189 out of 193 countries.
That is amazing. When did you start visiting other countries?
Well, my first international trip actually was as a child. I went to a Mexican border town. And that didn't really inspire me, so it wasn't a little bit later until I went to Belize and tried scuba diving for the first time, where I really got hooked on travel.
Wow, and you were telling me before we went on the air that when you started to work for American Airlines, that probably helped a little bit. You got some travel privileges, I'm sure, with the airline.
Oh, absolutely. One of the best perks working for the airline is that you get free travel, or nearly free travel. And so I took advantage of that for the 12 years that I worked for American Airlines, and I traveled to many, many countries.
And you have a very active Instagram account, and you blog about your travels. We're going to do a slideshow right now for a couple of minutes, and you don't have to talk about each one of these pictures, but I want you to share your vision on, the world. We think about Disneyland, it's a small world. You probably found commonalities among people from all walks of life.
Oh, absolutely. And that was one of the biggest learnings for me from all the travel is the human spirit is the same wherever you go. It doesn't matter which continent, what the border is, the religion, the color of people's skin. Everyone has the same human needs. They want to be loved, they need food and shelter, and they care for their kids.
Wow. Okay, so I know it's probably hard to pin down, but do you have a favorite country?
Yeah, I get asked that all the time, and I always say I do not have a favorite country because every country has something wonderful to offer. So I like to say I've never met a country I didn't like. But if I had to pick a few, so Ethiopia comes to mind. I've had some very enjoyable experiences there.
Cool.
They're very spiritual people, and there's a lot of history, a lot of colorful markets, lots of energy, and good food too.
All right, I'm glad that you said food because we have a couple of pictures of some food, and we're going to slow down and let you describe this. So what are we watching here?
Oh, that is pho from Vietnam. It's spelled P-H-O.
Okay.
And that's one of my favorite foods. And it's quite intensive to make. Now, this is a Lebanese breakfast bread. It's
really?
Za'atar menakish. Yes, it's a savory breakfast food, but it's very popular. Also from the Levant region, hummus with lamb. It's
wow.
quite tasty.
That
yes.
does look delicious. And that caught my eye. What is that?
Oh, it's amazing. It's from Georgia. It's called khachapuri.
Okay.
And it's basically a light fluffy dough bread with cheese and a kind of a runny egg on top.
Oh my
It's
God.
fantastic.
Yeah, that does sound terrific. Are you able to replicate some of these recipes when you get back home?
I am. I try to take a cooking class whenever I travel, if I have the time in my itinerary. So that's kind of how I learn even more about the culture and interact with locals. And I also bring the recipe home. If I don't take the cooking class, usually I've at least eaten at a local restaurant, whether it's a local dive or street food or even a Michelin type restaurant. And I'll try to research the recipes and recreate it at home.
So, what was the pandemic like for you? I mean, if you have this kind of this wanderlust to travel the planet and you couldn't travel, what was the last few months like for you?
Right. So I had a trip planned starting in January, and I didn't even have the end of it planned. So maybe June, and I was going to finish off all the countries. But I was in Siberia, actually, touring this Road of Bones, as it's called, a very remote region in the winter. And we weren't getting a lot of internet connections, so I didn't know how bad the pandemic was getting. But I was on my way to South Sudan, and I was transiting in Moscow. And I spent a couple nights there to do my laundry and refresh myself. And that's when I started hearing of borders closing, flights being canceled. And I was literally leaving that night for my trip to South Sudan for 2 weeks when I found out the borders to South Sudan were closed.
Wow.
Yes, so I had to cancel my flight and then just scramble to book a flight home the next day. So that was March 16th, and I've been at home ever since. So more than 3 months now at home.
Well, I've got to give a shout out to your husband. You've been married for 9 years. Mark Mitchell has a show with us, and he's a very understanding husband. I got to imagine, I mean, the conversation is, well, I'm off to Sudan. I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yes, it's it's give and take. So I travel. He travels to sports related events, which aren't my cup of tea, and also he plays a lot of golf.
Gotcha.
So
there's a
give and take, a healthy give and take.
I love that. Okay, so what are the 4 countries you haven't been to?
Oh, great question. I actually have some good countries left.
Okay.
So Cape Verde.
Okay. Where is that?
That is off the west coast of Africa, and it's former Portuguese colony. So there'll be some nice Portuguese food and lots of hiking there. So it's supposed to be very beautiful. And then I have Nigeria left. So I'm sure you're familiar with. Yeah. Yeah, it's very chaotic. Lots of interesting cultures. Great food. So that's one I need to go to still. And Mozambique.
Okay.
Also former Portuguese. So again, interesting food, beaches, maybe some wildlife. And then finally Namibia, which I'm hoping to save for last, but it just depends on when the borders open again. But I think I could spend a month just driving around Namibia. There's beautiful desert scenery, there's wildlife, there's local tribes that you can visit that still live in their authentic manner. So
that's really cool. Do you try to plan your travel so that you can knock off several countries in a row on one trip?
I do now. I didn't start counting countries until about 2014. So I just visited them haphazardly before that. So now I get a little bit better about planning countries that are logistically easy to go in between. Yes.
Have you ever felt in danger or fear? I mean, not every country's safe.
Right. Yes. So I visited all the typical unsafe countries and never felt too much in danger. But just because I got out without any problems or no danger doesn't mean it's a safe country. So for example, I went to Yemen last year, right when they started sort of accepting tourists. I went to mainland Yemen and also Socotra Island, and we didn't have any problems. We dressed in local garb to fit in as best we could, and we had a savvy guide who kept us safe. So I had no problems probably the scariest moment when I was in Pakistan working. We were working with a company in Karachi, and the government wanted to privatize the company. It was the airline that I was working with there. And the workers started rioting.
Oh, wow.
So we were called at our hotel early one morning, and they said, do not come into the office because people are probably going to storm the office with the protests. So we didn't go in the office, and the next day we were leaving anyway. So we took the hotel van to the airport, and we could barely get through. There were so many rioters in the streets, and there were fires burning. But we were slowly able to make it through, even though they were kind of chanting at the windows at us. We were able to get through to the airport. I was starting to think we were going to have to grab our bags and just walk the rest of the way to the airport.
I'm sure you've been asked this, but are you going to write a book?
Yes, my plan is to write a book. I'm trying to get my blog more content rich, and so the book will be based on some of the stories I've shared in the blog. And I also have another project I'm working on is a cookbook. So I plan to publish a book called A Taste of 193.
Oh, wow.
And so that's at least one recipe from each country that I've visited that either is a national dish or something that was really special that I feel represents the country very well.
Wow, and I see a children's game called Where in the World is Gina? You are amazing, and I'm sorry we're out of time for this segment, but we're going to put your website up. AdventurousGina.com is the website, and plug into all her social media. Gina, thank you for coming on the show. You've been amazing.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
You bet. And that's it for now. We'll see you next time.